Well, opening day did not go the way the Cardinals wanted it to. Is it a sign that we're about to see 2023 all over again? We'll talk about it coming up on B-Shape Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Shape Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you Friday, March 29th, 2024. You want the good news or the bad news first? Good news, baseball is back. Regular season baseball is back. The Cardinals played opening day. It happened. The bad news, the Cardinals played opening day. It happened. Dodgers win it 7-1 as the 2024 Cardinals open the new season, looking kind of like we remember them looking a year ago, a season that everybody would like to forget. Welcome into the show, which is posting here in the afternoon, a little bit later than I would like to get the episodes out, especially during the season when there's a game the night before. There's going to be a game the next night, and so I will most often have it up before late afternoon the next day. But I get a little bit of a reprieve here because the West Coast time for Friday night, it's such a late game that hopefully you get some mileage out of this podcast, even if you're not finding it until like dinner time on Friday, because the Cardinals' next game is still a number of hours away. So still going to do a show recapping opening day. Thursday night is my bowling night during the fall through the spring. We've only got a few weeks left, so that's the other thing. It was a Thursday game, and I'm still occupied on Thursday nights for the next few weeks. But most of the time, we'll be able to get these out much earlier. But I'm sure folks are wondering about impressions from the game. Cardinals lose 7-1, as I mentioned. No hits for the Cardinals outside of Paul Goldschmidt. That's honestly what jumps off the page to me, more so than anything Miles Michelas did or didn't do. We'll talk about Michelas and his comments a little bit after the game, that we're getting some play today in terms of the reaction to him talking about soft contact, which was kind of a rallying cry last year for some of the Cardinal pitchers. And we don't want to hear about soft contact anymore. I'm sure Cardinals fans don't. And initially my reaction, and I even tweeted about it too, was like, oh, we're doing this again, the soft contact thing in 2024. Yes, there was a soft ground ball that gets through a drawn-in infield in the first inning, and that allowed the first inning to compound a little bit on Michelas, but he got out of that with only 2 runs allowed anyway. The others, came later on a couple of home runs that he gave up, so it's not like the soft contact were the balls that were leaving the yard by Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. So when people hear soft contact and they look in your box score and see 2 home runs were allowed, you go, well, that doesn't really add up. But I also think context is important too, which I don't know if, just seeing the quote on Twitter, it sort of does incite within you that, oh boy, here we go again. Why are we whining and complaining about soft contact? When in reality, it may have been, and I think it was in one of the cases, that Michelas was asked specifically about that play early in the game when they did have the infield drawn in and a soft hit ended up getting through. And so I believe the question was specifically about that play, which is why the soft contact quote that you probably saw on Twitter from the various beat writers that sent it out, that's probably what, the reasoning was, is the context was he was asked specifically about, hey, that play. So I think that's probably why. But the more you look at it, the more you actually can have a little bit of fun with it. And I know Cardinals fans are not in the mood to have fun. This is like the burger phone thing when the Cardinals are losing, and some people say, I don't want to hear about the things that are fun or snarky for a team that's not winning. It's a lot easier to have fun when you're winning and to kind of make light of things. But I do think Michelas was basically kind of poking fun about Shohei Ohtani and the betting thing with some of the quotes that he gave, and specifically the one about soft contact ended up, I think, being in that context as well. I'm trying to find it here. And I will get to the offense, the discussion about how I said I think that's the thing that to me is the most, I don't know if you would say troubling about anything that happens on opening day, because it is just one game. But the thing that I would definitely be looking into the most is the offense, even more so than the starting pitching. But before I explain what I mean by that, I'll read this quote now that I finally found it. This is from Jeff Jones's Twitter account, covers the Cardinals for Belleville News Democrat. Quote, I'll take the weak contact all day. Do I think they're going to bloop in 10 hits in a row? Probably not. And here's where your ears perk up for the Shohei stuff. So I'll play the Vegas odds. I'll roll the dice. I'll bet on that all day. That weak contact's going to turn into outs. I think, honestly, the quote about weak contact was merely a vehicle for him to get in some snark about the Shohei Ohtani stuff. Because you don't say, I'll play the Vegas odds, I'll roll the dice, I'll bet on that all day, without some sort of ulterior meaning. My opinion, I think that's probably what he was doing a little bit. In which case I said, well, that's actually kind of funny. That's actually a little bit clever. But nobody wants to see the starting pitcher who gave up 5 and couldn't get through the 5th be clever. I get that side of it as well. It's a long offseason of trying to put last year behind the Cardinals, and then you start off with a game that looked a lot like last year's Cardinals, 7-1, losers against the Dodgers. But realistically, what did you expect from Miles Michelas against that lineup that features Betts, Ohtani, Freeman, 1 through 3? The $140 million man, Will Smith, batting cleanup. Max Muncy still got it. A couple of RBIs for him yesterday as well. You know, I think you figured it would maybe be a tough assignment for Miles Michelas, which that lefty-loaded lineup is one that in a contact-oriented pitcher, which Michelas is, he doesn't strike out a ton of guys, had 5 Ks yesterday, but I just kind of figured it would be a tough match. Like before the Gray injury, I was thinking, you line up Gray, and you do play 4 games in Los Angeles, although I hear maybe weather could be a concern for later in the weekend. But when you have a 4-game set, it's kind of hard to avoid a certain pitcher because you're basically throwing 80% of your rotation. But if there was one that matchup-wise, I would say maybe wouldn't fare as well against the Dodgers, it might be Michelas. But he ends up being the first guy to go after the Gray injury, and so that's understandable. 5 earned runs allowed, 4 1/3 innings pitched. Couldn't get through the 5th, as I mentioned. 7 hits allowed, a couple of walks, which is uncharacteristic for Michelas, a guy who I think walked 1 all of spring training in 21 innings, but had 2, and that included the first batter of the game, if I recall correctly. And then, of course, a couple of home runs. Man, Mookie Betts is a freak athlete. Turned on that fastball. It was like 92 up and in, and I thought location was not so bad, but if you're looking at that in on the hands and just you're going to turn on it like Mookie did, you're screwed. But it's like it didn't catch the middle of the plate, and Michelas is a guy who's going to throw strikes, kind of has to do that, but even in that example, maybe not a great location for Mookie because if he's looking for that pitch, which he clearly was, and able to turn on it, it's going to be a problem. But it's not like he left it over middle. It's just Mookie put a swing on it and was probably hunting for something low 90s in that inner half of the plate and was able to do something with it. He did a lot with it. And so that kind of puts you behind the 8 ball when your starter gives up 5. You are going to the bullpen early, which is not what you want to see. Palante gave up 1 run, couple of hits, but in an inning and 2/3, that's a 5.4 ERA. So not great, but not the end of the world. Covered the rest of the 5th inning and the 6th. Had a couple of strikeouts as well. So Palante could end up being a guy that misses a few more bats than you'd think. He could end up striking some guys out. Riley O'Brien was my champion of spring training, and I said for a long, long time, yeah, he's going to be on this team. There's not even really a question in my mind about that. You could tell that a couple of things you could tell about Riley O'Brien yesterday. A, that the stuff is going to play. He's got some wicked stuff. But B, he was a little amped, I think, a little nervous for the opportunity facing the Dodgers. I think it was Mookie. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Mookie Betts maybe that he went up and in on a couple of times. And it was like getting a little bit nerve-wracking. Like if he does this again, his location was just off. And I think it was probably from a nerves factor if I had to guess. And you could kind of tell that watching him. And then you're like, well, Riley O'Brien, he's like 29 years old, right? But if you look at his game log, he's only pitched like a couple games ever in the big leagues. Mostly he's been a minor leaguer, and this was a guy the Cardinals traded for. I think cash considerations from the Seattle Mariners gave him an opportunity in spring, and then he makes the bullpen. I think he's going to be a weapon for the Cardinals. I think he needed to get that first one out of the way, and did so, allowed a run in an inning, couple of walks, gave up a hit. Did strike out Ohtani, though. Had 2 strikeouts. I think he's going to be a good one still for the Cardinals. I'm not out on Riley O'Brien by any means as a result of what we saw yesterday. I think, if anything, the upside that you saw is something to be on the lookout for and to feel good about. It's just he's got to hone in the command and the control, and I think it'll happen if he just gets a little bit more comfortable, because I think he was definitely overamped for that one. And then Libby, that's a bright spot as well, throwing a scoreless inning. Again, by that point in the game, it was basically done and dusted, but a scoreless, hitless, walkless inning where he struck out a batter. I think Liberatore is going to be a very solid reliever. He may end up I like Jojo Romero, but by season's end, you may see Libby be like the 1A of the lefty relievers coming out. So that's how it looked like from a pitching perspective, but I said that I would explain myself when I say that the offense was actually the bigger concern for me yesterday, because, and the reason for that on the pitching side is, I expected it to be a tough road to hoe. I still do think it will be the rest of the series because the Dodgers have the best 1 through 3 in baseball for sure, and maybe that baseball has seen in a long time. And that 1 through 3 yesterday of Betts, Ohtani, Freeman went 5 for 8 with 6 runs scored, 4 runs batted in, and they also walked a combined 4 times. So they're on base 9 times in 12 plate appearances. That's not going to happen every game. Betts has a 636 batting average and a 2,000 OPS. I would say so far he's the MVP of the league, but he's gotten to play a couple more games than everybody else because of that Korea series. He's got 2 homers, 8 RBIs. He is on an absolute tear to begin the season, and maybe Mookie Betts would be another guy that we could see have some success tonight because he'll be facing a lefty in Zach Thompson. But I look at the Cardinal lineup and say maybe that's my concern from yesterday, because it's not that I expected the Cardinals to do anything in particular. I didn't end up doing like a pregame prediction. I meant to ask everybody their score predictions before the game and forgot to do that on Twitter at bschaefer12. We did finish our win total poll series on Twitter. And I think everybody landed at 83 wins is going to be the total for the Cardinals this year, which is coincidentally what I said it would be yesterday. Either it was on the podcast or on the big show or whatever that was. The other part too, I meant to say this at the very beginning of the show today. The reason I didn't record this in the morning was because I was doing Hot Take Central radio show on 590 KFNS, usually with Cam Jansen, Jim the Cat Hayes, and Cole Bartemus, but the Cat is out on the West Coast in Los Angeles. Matt Whitener was in there today with us. But anyway, 7 to 10 a.m. I was doing that. So that's why I'm late to the game on this. I'll try on Thursday nights. I do that show every Friday. I'll try on Thursday nights during the season to do Be Shafe Daily before I go to bed, if at all possible, so that I don't have to have such a delay for the Friday episode. But nevertheless, that's just housekeeping stuff that I thought I was going to say at the beginning. The thing with the lineup is whether I had an expectation coming into the game or not that they would do much against Tyler Glasnow, who I did say the Cardinals should try and get in the offseason. It's the one guy who was traded early that it would have been worthwhile. Dylan Cease was ultimately traded, but it wasn't until after the Cardinals had already kind of found their 5 by signing the 3 guys that they did. And there would have been maybe room to maneuver in that field, but the Cardinals didn't have a Drew Thorpe. That's who the Padres sent to the White Sox, a Double-A pitching prospect. I don't think the Cardinals had a pitching prospect on his level, or that maybe the White Sox would have preferred compared to getting Thorpe, and so that maybe takes you out of the running. I don't even know if the Cardinals offered on Dylan Cease late in the process. I would imagine not, just because they might have just been comfortable with where they were from a payroll perspective and from we have our starting 5, even with Sonny Gray out to begin. He's going to be back soon, and so we're not trying to necessarily upset the apple cart from that perspective and push somebody to the bullpen or anything like that. So that's kind of the way that I look at the Dylan Cease thing. But Glasnow was the other one that early in the process I thought, man, the Cardinals could maybe make a run at this guy. Would make a lot of sense, even if they don't give him an extension. I believe the Dodgers did give him a pretty healthy extension. And Ryan Pepio is the pitcher that the Rays ended up getting. Again, I don't know if the Cardinals had a Ryan Pepio. I think I'm saying that right. Maybe not. But I don't think the Cardinals had a pitcher like that the Rays would have wanted. So the couple of guys were traded. I had said all offseason the way to do it and really upgrade the potential upside of your rotation, in addition to some free agent signings, would be to make a trade for somebody that you could plop right in as the number 1 or the number 2, 1A, 1B to Sonny Gray, and they didn't do that. I don't know what I thought the Cardinals would do against Glasnow yesterday. They ultimately didn't do really anything against him, or the reliever Yarbrough, I believe, was the guy who finished the game for the Dodgers, got the old-fashioned 3-inning save. And all you get is the Paul Goldschmidt home run, given up by Glasnow, and beyond that, not a single hit from anyone not named Paul Goldschmidt. Contreras reached via walk. Victor Scott reached via error. And we'll talk about him as well, because I still thought, despite the fact that he didn't get a hit, it was a good showing for Victor Scott and a sign of maybe what the Cardinals could be seeing in him and the reason that you might want to keep him around and give him a real runway to try and earn a regular opportunity with this team, even after some of the guys who are injured make their way back. But nobody got a hit. It was just Paul Goldschmidt getting the only hit for the Cardinals, and that is kind of my concern with this team. And the cat out in Los Angeles still called into the radio show this morning, and we were talking about the lineup, and he said, it put me on the spot. He said, do you think this lineup's not going to hit? Kind of like a la Tony La Russa, however many years ago when he gave the famous "it's the first week of the season" quote. And I said, look, I think to be as good as the Cardinals are hoping to be and to contend, they need to have I keep saying top 5 lineup, top 5 offense. I don't know if it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but like top 6, top 8, they have to have a really good lineup that carries them. I think that's going to be the recipe to this team having success, because I think the pitching is going to be more middle of the pack is the way I look at it. So if there's going to be a glowing element of the roster, it needs to be the offense. And if you don't get a hit outside of your one guy, who I do think will be the Cardinals' best hitter this year, I put that on Twitter with the little preseason, whatever you want to call it, where I asked everybody to name their team MVP, the Gibby, which is funny now because we had all the Gibby controversy with Kyle Gibson a few weeks ago, and the rookie and reliever of the year. And for me, Goldschmidt, I think, is going to be the best hitter on this team. And if they're not in contention, is that somebody they potentially part with at the trade deadline rather than extend, is going to be a conversation that we would definitely get to as the summer months draw closer. But nobody else got a hit on the team. And that, again, it's one game, so you can't freak out about one game. But the consistency 1 through 9 is something. It's great on the days that everybody hits. If you're scoring 9-10 runs, those days are fun. But the Cardinals, the whole thing is to minimize the number of days throughout the calendar that everybody kind of croaks at the same time. And you don't have at least 3-4 runs to put up to match what your starter is probably going to give up on a given day. 3-4, maybe 5 runs sometimes, like Michelas did. Because you have a rotation that's kind of middle of the pack, maybe toward the latter end of the league, depending on, how the performances shake out this year. But like, these are guys that they're going to go 6 innings and give up 4 runs, and that's kind of the way you built it. That's almost the way it was designed to play out. So if that's the case, you have to have some push every day. You got to minimize those days where you don't score or you score 1 run on a solo. It's just not going to be sustainable, I think, with the way that the rotation is constructed. Let me know what you think, Cardinals fans. You a little more concerned about the pitching from yesterday or the lack of production by the offense outside of Paul Goldschmidt? Because I think we all kind of figured, well, there's going to be some margin for error on the pitching thing. And the reason that you can get away with having a more middle of the road pitching staff is if your lineup is top 10, top 5. That can be the way this Cardinal team can be okay. And I look 1 through 9 on paper, and I go, Brendan Donovan, do I think he's an above-average MLB hitter? I do. Paul Goldschmidt, of course I do. Gorman, of course I do. Arenado, same thing. Contreras, absolutely. One of the top 5 to 7 hitting catchers in baseball, Wilson Contreras. Alec Burleson, the jury's out on that, but he had a good spring, and I think there is a lot in there for him to have a fine season. But that would maybe be the one spot where you'd go, well, we'll see. Time will tell. But you also do figure that when Lars Nootbaar comes back, he's into that slot. And do I think Lars Nootbaar is an above-average MLB hitter? I do. Jordan Walker, I definitely do. I think he's going to have a good year. Victor Scott, we'll see. Mason Wynn, we'll see. Those 2 guys at the bottom are question marks at this point, just because they're rookies, and we haven't seen much at all of Scott other than the 1 game yesterday. And Mason Wynn, what we did see of him late last year was not very good offensively at the big league level, but we believe in the skill set. But I still look at that lineup and say, well, at least 6 of the spots I consider to be not just average, but like above average to me, MLB standard at all 6 of those spots. And then for the other guys, there is absolutely upside. And really it's 7 if you count Nootbaar rather than Burleson, which Nootbaar would play left, and then it could be maybe Gorman DHing, Donnie at second. Again, whatever the iteration is there, you're talking about 1 through 7 being pretty robust, in my opinion, once Nootbaar comes back. And maybe Burleson can be that kind of guy. Maybe Matt Carpenter can do something more than we would have expected when they signed him. He had a good spring, too. He'll get some DH run here in the early portion of the season, I would have to imagine. So that's really 7 out of 9 spots that you feel pretty good about. being above average. But if the difference is on paper, you're going, yeah, I like these guys, and then those guys go and you have too many days where it's just maybe one guy lifting the heavy lumber and everybody else just, I'm not going to say mailing it in because I know that's a touchy subject. It's not that the guys aren't trying to get hits, but when you just look at a lineup that goes over on the day and gets on base on an error and a walk, and that's it, you go, okay, well, that's obviously not something that's going to be sustainable every day. And so, I don't know. You're going to face good pitchers throughout the year. Tyler Glasnow is one of the better ones that you're probably going to face. If he's healthy, he's going to be a Cy Young candidate. He's got that kind of stuff, in my opinion. And he had it going yesterday. But also, that's the name of the game in professional baseball. Professional sports, you're best against their best. And your best is going to have to, be on that level at times, even against the best teams. Like, you can get away with beating up on kind of the bottom feeders of the league, but not as much anymore as you used to could, because now you play a more balanced schedule. So it's not like you can just say, all right, we get the Pirates 18 times this year. We get the Cubs in their down years. We get them 18, 19 times. The Reds, those teams, for one, in the NL Central are getting better. I mean, the Pirates won 76 games last year, if I'm not mistaken. Beat the Cardinals by like 5 games in the division. So even if you did have the more unbalanced schedules of where you play the division opponents 18, 19 times, you still don't get to have that narrative of like, oh, yeah, you beat up on the Central. The Central doesn't have any great teams necessarily, but I also don't know if the Central has anybody that's going to lose, 95 or 100 games. I don't really think it does. I know we're quick to count the Brewers out, but they did win 92 last year. They traded their ace, but they didn't really tear it down in other ways. They didn't sign a ton of guys in the offseason. Reese Hoskins, I think, is a good pickup. But, I don't think the Brewers are going to be 100 losses bad. I don't even think they would lose 95. Might not even lose 90. Might be in the mix. Might win 75, 80, 85 games. That's still possible. I do think if they're trending in the wrong way at the deadline, they'll sell, which could hurt them in the overall standings. But you can't really just beat up on these bottom feeder teams. When you play the Dodgers, you will have to beat them at times, or your final record is going to indicate. Like, if you don't beat the Dodgers, D-backs are a good team, Phillies are a good team. Like, you play all these guys in the first few weeks of the season. There's a lot of good teams in baseball. If you want to be one of them, you do have to compete against those teams. So while it is just one game and one loss to the Los Angeles Dodgers, I think the other side of that is the Dodgers are in Major League Baseball, and so the game counts for your record. And at the end of the year, it's going to be hard to get to that 83, 85, 87. If every time you see a good team, you go, well, that's a good team. You knew that would be a tough series. Sure, mentally you can kind of couch it that way. But those bad teams too, they end up winning 50, 60, 70 games during a year. So it's not going to be automatic when you play the bad teams, even if you're a good team, that you're going to beat them every time. And if you're one of those middle of the pack teams, like, those are where your hay is going to have to be made if you're falling short against the good teams. It's not like complicated discussion point. It's not rocket science on this, but it'd be nice for the Cardinals to be able to get out of Los Angeles with a series split, 2 out of 4. Harder to do once you're down in the series already. You certainly can't leave it being swept. That's not going to be getting the new season off on the right foot. So, they're concerns. It's one game worth of concern. For a lot of Cardinals fans, you might say, I'm not really concerned because this is kind of what I expected it to be. I think they're not going to be that good this year. And if you're in that boat, then yesterday probably confirmed a lot of your priors. I do think you can make the case that we saw some good things from the team yesterday. Liked what you saw from Libby. Intrigued by O'Brien. Want to see him hone it in. Victor Scott, though, I think is interesting, man. Yeah, goes over. Had the hit that I thought would be maybe called an infield hit, but the throw was wild, so it's ruled an error. That's how he reached base and then stole second, which wasn't really, particularly close, I thought, on the stolen base attempt. But, that's what his speed is going to do to infielders, to pitchers. He's going to be a problem out there, and something that the other team is going to have to reckon with. All 5 guys on that infield, the pitcher, they're going to have to be thinking about those things, and that's a benefit to the Cardinals. That's something that I think you can use as a weapon in your favor. Hopefully he gets on base enough times throughout the season that it ends up being kind of a worthwhile usage of a roster spot, of a lineup spot. I think defensively he's going to be that no matter what. But if you're talking about a guy who has blazing speed but is going to get on base at a 290 clip or something, that wouldn't necessarily be what gets you excited. But I think Victor Scott can certainly do that and then some. I think he can have a good enough on base to where he gets on first and you're basically counting the pitches until he's on second. And then you got to have guys drive him in. That's going to be incumbent upon the top of the lineup, probably. I understand the right, left, and they did that yesterday and had a really balanced lineup. It did end up being Burleson rather than Carpenter. We were kind of wondering about what that would look like. We said Burleson would make more sense, although he did end up striking out. So the reasoning was Glasnow throws hard and he can maybe make better contact than Carp catching up to the fastball. It didn't end up going that way, and I think he struck out on a breaking ball anyway. But in the case of the right, I don't know. I would like to see Victor Scott maybe bat ninth instead of eighth, which would kind of mess up the right situation that they had going. But I want him, if he's on base, I want the best hitters on the team batting at that point to have a chance to drive him in. Nothing against Mason Wynn, but I think he's still a work in progress. We're waiting to see what he's going to be offensively at this level. Whereas, Brendan Donovan, Paul Goldschmidt, you feel a little better making sure those guys get opportunities to drive him in, which ultimately I think at least one of those guys did because they turned the lineup over and still had Victor on base but weren't able to drive him in. But anyway, I think Victor Scott, he's going to be a kind of must-watch television, which tonight, if you have Apple TV Plus, that'll be the way that you can watch the Cardinals. Kind of rough to have Game 2 be on a subscription service, but that's the name of the game. It's the way baseball's going, and when you're playing the Dodgers, you know that you're going to have some non-Bally Sports games over that weekend series, given the fact that it is the Dodgers and, they're kind of Earth's mightiest heroes, as I referred to them yesterday. So that's something that's going on. Hopefully you have Apple TV and can watch the game on Friday night. If not, we'll still do a recap for you on Be Shafe Daily to talk about the important stuff that you may have missed. But it's the offense for me. That's what you're looking to see be consistent. The pitching is going to have to be good enough, but there are going to be games where you give up 4, 5, 6 runs and still are going to sometimes have to find a way to win. I think that's the way that they're built. Credit to Paul Goldschmidt. That's the one thing that you can say. If you were worried about his spring stats, it may be a way to show that spring stats don't matter. I don't think you can demonstrate that much better than Paul Goldschmidt stepping in and having a 3-hit day, hitting a home run against Glasnow and a pretty good pitching staff there for the Dodgers. So that's kind of the way I break it down from day one. Cardinals are 0-1. They're back in last place in the Central, I guess, technically, through one game. But a long way to go. Let me know what you think, Cardinals fans, in the comment section below here on YouTube. How are we reacting to Game 1? It's 1 of 162, but it does kind of feel like a lot of the way that last year felt, which was not very pleasant for Cardinals fans. So let me know in the comments below what you think. Make sure to hit that subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen for daily Cardinals content. That's what I'm going to strive to do, even if it's not a full Be Shafe Daily. If it's a shorter podcast, this one's going to be 25 minutes, 30 minutes or so, which is maybe the sweet spot. I know normally some people would say, I do a commute. I'd like it to be longer. It's just going to depend day to day what we're able to put out there. But I do want to try to be very consistent with it this year, so you can expect all of that good stuff to go on the youtube.com/@BSchaeffer12 page. Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer. So appreciate you guys who are already subscribed. Go ahead and hop on board if you haven't yet. And Spotify and Apple Podcast is also a place to listen to the Be Shafe Daily podcast. So search Be Shafe Daily on those avenues and make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That's going to do it, though, for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, so very much. If you're starved for more Cardinals talk, 4 to 6 p.m. on Friday afternoon, I will be in the driver's seat for the big show on KTGR in Columbia, Missouri, where we'll be talking a lot of Cardinals because, that's Cardinals country. It is a Cardinals affiliate on KTGR, and my co-host Andy is out for the long weekend, and so it'll be me and producer Chris Mitchell mostly talking Cardinals, talking some NCAA tournament. So if you want to check that out and you're listening to this in time to be able to do so, and you want to be able to text in, ask your questions, KTGR.com, the big show, 4 to 6 p.m. on, every day, Monday through Friday. But today in particular, Friday, March 29th, it'll just be me and the board op and producer Chris. So check it out if you want some more Cardinals talk, because Charlie Marlowe stood me up. Low-hanging fruit we were going to do today, but I think the calendar got away from us a little bit, and I like to chirp him. So don't go yell at Charlie. I think we'll do 2 episodes next week to make up for the miss. But that's it. That really is it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time on Be Shafe Daily. Peace.